Islam. Islam 101.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah amma ba'du. Welcome to another program, another episode of Islam 101. And we're dealing with the sources of legislation in the religion of Al-Islam. In our last episode, we dealt with the Quran being the first source of legislation, and with the Sunnah, the authentic Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, the Messenger of Allah, being the second source of legislation. And we tried to explain the unique connection between the Quran and the Sunnah and how they have both been given to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Allah. And it's not permissible to give preference to one over the other, but they are together and they will not be separated until Yawmul Qiyamah. And then we began to deal with and discuss the issue of the ijma' of the scholars of Al-Islam, especially the ijma' or the consensus of the companions. And the ijma' means that all of the Muslims, or all of a group of Muslims, the scholars in particular, they agree that a particular thing is not permissible. For an example, the issue of intoxicants. All of the scholars in Al-Islam have taken the opinion that the consumption of khamr or intoxicants or narcotics is not permissible. You may find certain Muslims who are not scholars saying that intoxicants are permissible, but their position does not hold any weight in the religion because they're not the qualified people who the Muslims look to for direction and for the understanding of their religion. But as it relates to the ijma', we have to make mention that in the previous episode, we tried to make it clear that the Quran and the Sunnah, as the first two sources of legislation, there's no differences of opinion amongst the Muslims, past or present, concerning the role that the Quran plays and the role that the Sunnah plays in terms of their ability to legislate. There's no ikhtilaf, no differences of opinion. But when we come to the ijma', the consensus, there are some scholars who don't embrace or accept this concept of al-ijma'. I just want to bring that to your attention in trying to be fair and just and shedding light on that aspect of the issue. But overall, the ijma', when you look at the Quran and when you look at the Sunnah and the practical application of the Quran and the Sunnah by the companions, as well as the scholars who came after that, we find that the strongest position is that the ijma' does have the ability to make something permissible or impermissible. And the reason why we say that is not because it's something from our minds. I like the ijma' and I believe in the ijma', so therefore I say it's the correct position. No. We say that because of the authentic hadith, that my community, the scholars, they will not have a consensus on anything that's wrong. So that's the actual kalam, or statement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we are obligated to embrace and to accept wholeheartedly everything that Allah's Messenger has said in his authentic sunnah. So those are the first three sources of legislation in Al-Islam. Again, what does it mean, a source of legislation? What we're talking about are those sources that have the ability and the power to make something permissible or impermissible. Am I a source of legislation? Is a scholar in the local masjid a source of legislation? Is a parliament in any given country a source of legislation? Hasha lillah. No. That should be understood. No one has the ability to legislate, to make halal or haram, permissible or impermissible, except Allah. And it's one of the major crimes and sins for a person to delve into that arena without holding on to the Quran and the Sunnah. Someone who does it from his own mind, then this person is definitely on the road to destruction. So that's the meaning of masadir of at-tashri', the sources of legislation, the Quran, the Sunnah, the ijma' of the ulama, especially the companions. The fourth source is what is known as al-qiyas. Al-qiyas, which can be loosely translated as analogy. To compare something with something else, and because of particular properties that are present in this particular thing, the other thing that you're comparing it to takes on the same ruling. That is al-qiyas. For an example, and I think the best way to explain this is by giving you an example. It has been mentioned, as Abdullah alluded to in the last episode, and as everyone knows, it has been alluded to the fact that intoxicants are not permissible in Islam. The word khamr has been used in the Quran. Verily, the shaitan, he wants to put between you people, mankind. He wants to create hatred and rancor between you by you using intoxicants and gambling. So khamr is in the Quran. Rasulullah told us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fawahish, inna al-khamr fawahish. Verily, intoxicants are the mother, it's the mother of all fahisha, all evil, dirty, lewd things. So the khamr, the mentioning of the word, is in the Quran and the Sunnah. Whereas some of the narcotics that people use today, like heroin, may Allah protect us from the trial of drugs and narcotics, that is not in the Quran and it's not mentioned in the Sunnah. Nor was it present during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as we know it today. 1,424 years ago, they didn't know what heroin was. They didn't know what cocaine was or some of the other narcotics that people are using. So now in Islam, what is the ruling of using heroin? What's the ruling? Someone may say it's permissible to use heroin because it's not in the Quran, nor is it in the Sunnah. We don't find this being present during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how can there be a ruling at all? We say no. The ruling of heroin is the same ruling as khamr, the same ruling as intoxicants. Why? Because they have similar qualities and similar properties. That is qiyas, making analogy. Something that wasn't mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah being given a ruling, the same ruling of something else that was mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, and it was given that same ruling because of the similar characteristics and properties. So the person who consumes intoxicants, he loses his mind, he does things that are not permissible, he steals people's monies, he harms people and so forth and so on, he loses his intellect, he can't pray, all of those things that go on when a person drinks khamr. Same thing happens when he takes cocaine or heroin. Same thing happens. So as a result of that, this gets the same ruling as that because of the similar properties. That is al-qiyas. Allah has mentioned in the Quran, after telling the stories of so many of the people, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, O you people of intellect, take a lesson from this. Allah would tell us the story of Pharaoh, the oppression that Pharaoh put upon Bani Israel, the children of Israel. He would tell us about those people who used to shortchange people and dealing with them in business. He would tell us about the evil outcome and the result of people who were given to highway robbery. He would tell us about all of these issues of the final outcome of people who did wrong. Travel through the earth and look at what was the end result of those people rejected and denied. Why would Allah tell us this? Qiyas has something to do with this. Allah tells us the stories about these people, and He tells us and draws our attention to these issues as if to say, if you people do what these people did in the earth of the evil, then the evil results that befell them is going to befall you, the qiyas. What happened to them will happen to you if you did what they did of the evil works. And similarly, in contrast, those people who did good, from the religious people, from the believers, from the people who had God-fearingness, those people who had a taqwa, those people who had awareness, those people who knew why they were created. Likewise, look at what the end result was for them. They were given domination in the earth. Allah caused their religion to become prevalent and to spread in the land. Allah gave them safety and security. Allah subjected their enemies and put their enemies underfoot. So Allah is telling us, those people who do the righteous deeds, then the end result of righteous deeds will be what happened to those people. Not to mention the ultimate reward of going to paradise, which is an addition. So that's the concept of al-qiyas. We know that something is haram or halal, permissible, impermissible, because of qiyas. It doesn't have a ruling concerning that particular thing in al-Islam, but because there is something that is similar to it that has been mentioned in the Quran, similar to it that was mentioned in the Sunnah. As a result of that, this thing will get the same ruling. Is that point understood? Because qiyas is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the legislation of Islam. And that's why we find certain madhabs, in particular, we don't want to mention any madhabs, but we have to be careful. Sometimes there would be a text from the Quran and the Sunnah, and the scholar or the individual will make qiyas, and there's a text from the Quran and the Sunnah, which is a very important point. And that is, qiyas is not permissible to use if there's a text from the Quran and the Sunnah. Because we explain, what is the qiyas? The qiyas is a ruling that is rendered on a particular thing that doesn't have a ruling. It's not mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah. It wasn't present during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there was something else similar to it. So because of the similarities between the two and the characteristics and the properties, because of similarities, this thing that wasn't mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah was given the ruling of the thing that was mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah that is similar to it. So if we have something mentioned in the Quran about a particular thing, can you make qiyas, Abdullah?
Qiyas?
Yes. Can you make analogy? If the Quran or the Sunnah mentioned something, it gave you a text about a particular thing. Yeah. Can you make qiyas when there's an ayat or a sunnah, a hadith about that particular thing?
Yes, you can make qiyas. Yes, you can.
What do you say about that? You can't make the qiyas, Abdullah. Again, once again, the qiyas is the ruling that is given to something that there's no text from the Quran and the Sunnah concerning that. There's no text. Allah didn't mention anything about that. Is there an ayat in the Quran in which Allah said, heroin is impermissible? Is heroin, cocaine, is it mentioned in the Quran?
It's not mentioned.
It's not mentioned in the Quran. It's not mentioned in the Quran. So it's not permissible for a person, if the thing is mentioned in the Quran, to make qiyas. Qiyas is only used when there's no text from the Quran and the Sunnah. It's used when a text is given on something that is similar to that particular thing that there's no text on. And that is the qiyas. Do you guys have any questions about al-qiyas? Al-qiyas.
So who has the right to compare this? Make qiyas, any of us, or
that's an excellent question.
Special scholars have to do it.
I'm impressed with that question, and you do not cease to impress me, Sarada, mashallah. Who has the right to delve into the arena of making qiyas? Is that the right of every Amr and Bakr from the people? No. We're going to deal with that, inshallah, when we come back. It's such an important issue. We'll deal with it in further detail. So make sure you come back, inshallah.
Islam 101.
Huda TV strives to bring you, our viewers, the best in Islamic programming. Please send your comments and suggestions to feedback@huda.tv.
Islam 101.
Alhamdulillah, welcome back to the program Islam 101, in which we're dealing with the sources of legislation in the religion of Islam. And we're dealing with one of the more complicated subject matters concerning the sources of legislation, and that is al-qiyas. And in actuality, it's not really difficult, but it can become pretty deep and pretty extensive. What we're trying to do here is just to share with you on a basic 101 level, Islam 101. This is not designed to get into the deep essences of the conditions of qiyas and the different types of qiyas. No, we just wanted to give you a surface understanding of what it is that this particular source of legislation does and what it's about. So once again, because from experience, I know that people don't always understand this issue. Al-qiyas, what is it? Analogy. Analogy, that's the translation. And analogy is, the qiyas is, when something becomes halal or haram by using analogy, qiyas. The Quran and the Sunnah has mentioned many things. And there are some things that the Quran and the Sunnah didn't mention. So, in this case, what we do is, we come to a particular ruling based upon the fact that the issue that we're looking at and we're trying to find a ruling for, we're trying to derive a ruling for this particular thing. We want to know, what is the permissibility or the impermissibility of praying in an airplane? Is there an airplane mentioned in the Quran? Nothing is mentioned about the airplane in the Quran. So as a Muslim, I'm going to fly from one part of the world to the other part of the world, and I want to know, can I pray in an airplane? Is it halal or haram? Well, Qiyas says it is permissible for me to pray in an airplane, even though the issue of the airplane is not mentioned in the Quran. Why is it permissible to fly in the airplane, to pray the salah in the airplane? It's permissible because the Quran and the Sunnah have mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to pray on top of his riding animal. He used to pray on top of his riding animal. He didn't always have his feet on the earth, and he didn't always pray on the earth the normal way that we pray. He used to pray on his animal, and he would make the bowing position and the sajda, the prostration position and the upright position, and he would say and do the things that he normally said and did, but he was on his camel, on his horse. So we make the ruling of the camel and the horse as it relates to salah, as it relates to praying, we apply that same ruling through analogy, through qiyas, and we say, yes, it's permissible to pray on an airplane or in an airplane because Rasulullah, he did the same thing. That's what qiyas is. Al-qiyas, making analogy. Sardar, our brother here, he mentioned before the break, who has the ability to make qiyas? Who has the ability? The person who has the ability to make qiyas in the religion, analogy in the religion, they are the scholars and the scholars alone. It is a topic that can be tricky and complicated and difficult because in order to make qiyas, here's something you don't know the ruling of. It necessitates that you have knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. And I don't mean surface knowledge. I mean that you have deep, grounded knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. That will equip you and enable you to make the qiyas. As for the regular people, we make qiyas in our lives. We make qiyas in our dunya, in our lives. A man, he had a job, and he came late to that job, and he wound up getting fired from that job. He lost his job, and as a result of getting fired and losing his job, he went through all kinds of financial difficulties. So now he goes for his next job. When he gets hired for the next job, he says, I'm going to be 30 minutes early every day in the new job because of what happened at the last job. So he makes something similar to a qiyas, what happened the last time. He didn't have this job before. He never worked in this job before, but he knew what happened before caused what he did, caused him to lose his job. So now he can't do those same things because if he did the same things in the new job, the same thing that happened to him in the old job will happen to him more than likely in the new job. So he can make qiyas in his dunya, in his life. In his life. And we all make qiyas in our lives. But in the religion, halal and haram, this is the right of Allah. And when we deal with the points, the 10 points that we're going to deal with, inshallah, concerning the halal and the haram, the permissible and the impermissible, we're going to deal with that point. That only Allah has the right to make something permissible or to make something impermissible. So those are the 4 main sources of legislation in the legislation of Al-Islam, in the fiqh or the legislation of the religion of Al-Islam. The 5th one, and there are quite a few, the 5th one is the statement of the companion, the qawlu sahaba. The statement of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes a thing halal or makes a thing haram. They were the ones who were with Rasulullah. They were the ones who the Quran was revealed on them and because of them. They were the ones who understood the Arabic language, which is the language of the legislative bodies in Al-Islam. They know and they're the most equipped and qualified to say and to make opinions in the religion. So therefore, their statements can make something halal. Their statements can make something haram, permissible or impermissible. But it's conditional. It's conditional. I want you guys to write these conditions. When does the statement of the companion, when is it taken and when is it considered? When is it a source of legislation? Number 1, when it does not go against the Quran and the Sunnah. The companion may say something that goes against the Quran and the Sunnah. As an individual, he didn't hear the particular hadith, so he takes a position. So the first one is when it doesn't go against the Quran and Sunnah. If the companion says something against the Quran and the Sunnah, it has to be rejected. The only person who we obey unconditionally is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second condition concerning the companions is, if the companion mentions something that is in the unseen, the ghaib. If he mentions something concerning the unseen, then it becomes a proof in the religion. Abdullah ibn Abbas said about the kursi, Ayatul Kursi, the footstool, Ayatul Kursi, Ayat 255 from Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran. Abdullah ibn Abbas said that the kursi is the footstool. It's the footstool. There's no hadith that says that. There's no ayat of the Quran that says that. That is from the unseen. He would never say that unless he got that from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the second condition. The third and final condition is it becomes a proof when all of the other companions, when there's no other companion who is against him. There's no other companion who took an opposite position to that particular companion. So if that companion makes a statement, yes, no, halal, haram, and there's no other companion who mentioned anything else against that, then that is a proof. Now if there's another companion who took a varying position and he says something opposite, then what do we do? I want to ask you, Nazmi. One companion said halal, another companion said haram. One companion said halal, another one said haram. Now what do we do in this case?
We take both opinions and we take the one that's the strongest point.
That's what we do. Allah yaftah alayk. That's a good answer, Akhi. What we do is, we look now to compare which opinion is the strongest opinion. And then we take that opinion, which is the strongest opinion. So those are the conditions that help us to understand when the statement of the companion becomes an argument. It becomes a hujjah. It makes something halal, haram, helps us to understand a particular point in the religion. If the companion says something that is from the unseen, he wouldn't have never said that on his own by just making an effort or ijtihad. Number two, his statement cannot go against the Quran and the Sunnah. Maybe this particular companion didn't never hear that particular ayat, or he never knew that particular hadith, so he took his position. He didn't know that that ayat was abrogated. So he said that muta' marriage is permissible. Temporary marriage is permissible, as it happened with Abdullah ibn Abbas. He didn't know that it was abrogated and made haram. So when he was asked later on, he said, yes, it's permissible. No, we're going to say, no, that goes against the Quran and the Sunnah. Just because he's Abdullah ibn Abbas, we don't accept that opinion. And thirdly, if he takes a position and he stands alone, there's no other companion who is going against him. If there happens to be another companion who's going against him, then we have to look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said about that issue. The haqq is with who, is with which one of them, and then we take the position based upon that. I hope that's clear as well. As it relates to the statement of the companions, similar to the qiyas and similar to the ijma', some scholars don't accept this particular point of view. There's ikhtilaf, there's differences between the scholars in this. But again, when you look at the Quran and you look at the authentic Sunnah and you look at the practical application of the companions and the scholars after them, it becomes clear that the strongest position here is, yes, the companions, their positions are arguments and proofs in the religion, especially those companions who are described as the Khulafa al-Rashidin. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, may Allah be pleased with them. Because the Prophet told us, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, alaykum bis sunnati wa sunnati al-Khulafa al-Rashidin al-Mahdiyin min ba'di. You people should take my sunnah and the rightly guided sunnah of Abu Bakr, and Umar, Uthman, and Ali. He also says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, istaqiru al-Qur'an min arba'. Learn the Quran, take the Quran from four of my companions. And he mentioned Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Salim, the Mawla of Abu Hudayfa. And he mentioned Mu'adh, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Salim, the Mawla of Hudayfa, the free slave of Hudayfa. And the fourth one, I don't remember who they are. So these are cases where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told the people. And Abdullah bin Mas'ud is the fourth one. These are cases where Rasulullah commanded us, take from my companions, understand the religion from individual companions, from particular companions. So the statement of the companion is an argument, is a proof in the religion. It makes something halal, haram. It helps us to understand a particular issue. So do you brothers have any questions concerning anything that we've mentioned concerning and dealing with the masadir of a tashri', the sources of legislation? Abdullah.
For example, if I'm in a doubtful matter, I don't know if the thing is halal or haram. What do I do in that matter? As an individual.
What? Say it again.
I'm in a doubtful matter. For example, there's something in front of me. I don't know if this thing is haram or halal. What do I do?
Excellent question. A Muslim finds himself in a situation where a thing can be halal or haram, permissible or impermissible. And he doesn't have a scholar around him or anyone who can help him with his religion. What should he do? What he should do is take the safe way out. The grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hussein, he narrated the hadith that Rasulullah said, "Da' ma yuribuka ila ma la yuribuka." Leave what you doubt for what you don't doubt. If you don't know the ruling, then leave it alone and you'll be safe. Whereas if you did it, you're taking a chance. 50-50. It may come out that the thing is halal, or it may come out that it is haram. So you leave what you doubt for what you don't doubt. That's an excellent question, Abdullah. And with that question, we're going to bring this particular episode to an end. I hope and I wish we can get deeper into it at a later time, because we want to give these issues their proper due so that people will understand them correctly in the religion. But we do the best that we can. And we ask Allah to accept it from us and to accept it for you. We hope that it was clear for you and for our respected viewing audience. We're going to stop here. We ask Allah to make us fuqaha, people who understand their religion. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا الأمين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام على من اتبع الهدى.
Islam. Islam 101.